We have come a long way, but we still have very far to go. Today I would like to talk to you a little bit about the Black Lives Matter movement. First, I will start with a little bit of history, and then I will talk about the movement itself and how it came to be as well as its purpose. First, with the history. Blacks had to prove that they were human before we can ever prove that we were worthy of being equal. Some of the same rhetoric is still apparent today, sadly enough. In an article titled "Blacks Aren't Human," posted on March 15, 2015 on the nationalvanguard.org, they attempted to argue that blacks are lesser, stating blacks shouldn't be considered human. We are not of the same species. We look and act different as well as have different personalities. This is, of course, as if we are all supposed to be the same anyway. They make the argument that blacks are akin to dogs. They later in the article discuss why we are ugly and incapable of being intelligent. Now that I've said a snippet on the rhetoric of blacks not being human, I would like to give you a few examples of my people not being treated as human. Blacks were used for experiments. For example, in BreakingBrown.com, in an article titled "White Torture on Black Bodies" on March 14, 2014, they gave a few examples of these occasions. In one case, a man was in a car accident and a few of his bones were broken, and the doctors gave him a toxic dose of plutonium. For those of you who don't know what plutonium is, it is a deadly man-made element that they now use for nuclear reactor fuel. This was posted on Green Road Journal on April 17th of this year. In another case, a young lady was complaining about a knot in her stomach, and the doctor was supposed to only fix the knot, but he thought that it might be a great idea to go on ahead and take out her uterus as well. As we know, without a uterus, you can't have children. Most people already know about the Tuskegee experiment, but in the event that you don't, they infected black men with syphilis. According to the article 5 Unethical Medical Experiments that use black people as guinea pigs, published on December 2, 2014 on AtlantaBlackStar.com, the study was done to document the natural history of syphilis. To add to this, participants were not given penicillin, nor were they made aware of the effects or effective treatment options for this disease, as well as they did not tell the participants the dangers of the disease. So you have men giving it to their wives, those wives giving birth, and those children being born with syphilis. One more before I move on. In a video clip titled 10 Evil Experiments Done on African Americans posted on July of this year, they stated that white surgeons cracked open and probed the brains of black children and operated on the genitals of enslaved black women without anesthetics. And just in 2014, reports that the Center of Disease Control and Prevention was hiding results from a test of experimental measles vaccines that actually increased the likelihood of black children developing autism. These are just a few of the examples of the inhumane things that were done to black people. So maybe now you can see why it's called Black Lives Matter. The truth of the matter is we shouldn't have to explain why Black Lives Matter. The real question and issue is not about the movement, but a society that has positioned us to actually have to have the movement. The Black Lives Matter movement came about when George Zimmerman was acquitted of the murder of Trayvon Martin. In an article titled "Understanding the Rhetoric of Race" by Andre Johnson, he states, "The hashtag teaches auditors that black persons have a positive presence, that violence against black bodies is news, that white privilege does exist, and that colorblind rhetoric does not help bring equality or justice." Now that I have told you how the Black Lives Matter movement started, I would like to talk to you a little bit about the movement's purpose. The purpose of the Black Lives Matter movement is to call attention and action, as well as advocate for racial injustices. On their website, they clearly state what they are wanting, and if you pay attention, you can see that it just is a condensed version of what the Black Panthers were asking for. This quote is straight from their website. They first demand an end to the war against black people. Since the country's inception, there have been named and unnamed wars on our communities. We demand an end to the criminalization, incarceration, and killing of our people. They want reparations for the past and continuous harms the government, responsible corporations, and other institutions that have profited off the harm they have inflicted on black people. From colonialism to slavery, through food and housing redlining, mass incarceration, and surveillance, must repair the harm done. For those of you who don't know what redlining is, as quoted on libniu.edu in an article titled Redlining, a Black and White Issue, it is a term that originated from the mortgage lenders practicing of circling on a map whole areas, often zip code areas, with a red line. These red line areas were designated as off limits for receiving home mortgage and improvement loans. To some, those lines meant financial prudence. To others, they meant racism. The circling of the neighborhoods with a red pin is no longer done, but the underlying process of an urban credit crunch still continues. Thirdly, they demand investments in the education, health, and safety of black people, instead of investments in the criminalizing, caging, and harming of black people. They want investments in the black communities determined by black communities, and de-investment from exploitive forces including prisons, fossil fuels, police, surveillance, and exploitive corporations. They demand economic justice for all and a reconstruction of the economy to ensure black communities have collective ownership, not merely just access. Lastly, they demand a world where the most impacted in our communities control the laws, institutions, and policies that are meant to serve us, from our schools to our local budgets, economies, police departments, and our land, while recognizing the rights and histories of our indigenous families also being respected. The movement isn't saying only Black Lives Matter. It's more of a Black Lives Matter too, not an either or, but an and circumstance. Because somehow, somewhere, some of the people have forgotten this very important fact. Some make the argument that it should say all lives matter. But the rebuttal to that is, if I say all lives matter, then you tend to keep forgetting that my life matters. You are taking away from the fact that my life is being threatened, not necessarily yours. Funny enough, when the Blue Lives Matter hashtag came about, people were outraged when the clapback for that was all jobs matter. But somehow people couldn't see the parallel between the two issues. Now that I've talked a little bit about the movement, I would like to talk about the protests. In an article titled Why Protest on popularresistance.org, they state that protesting is a way to make a statement that challenges a particular way of doing things, to challenge the hegemonic power of the state. Protests often begin as nonviolent but quickly escalate when police overreact, such as the cases in Ferguson in 2014 and the Kent State University shootings in 1970, producing a more militant protest. To protest is a democratic act when it claims freedom from state and corporate abuse. I've heard people say, why do it in the streets and block traffic? And I promise that it's intentional. And it's to force you to acknowledge whatever it is that I'm protesting about. If I stand on the side of the road, you can keep with your life and maybe even never notice me. But the second I'm in front of you, you can't get around, I now have your attention. If someone was taking your people out one by one, would you be able to be quiet? Would you fight for justice for your brother? We shouldn't have to explain why our lives matter, because if equality truly existed, we wouldn't have to. We shouldn't have to explain why we're walking down the street in a hoodie or in a particular neighborhood, because white people don't have that problem, to be quite frank with you. The amount of melanin in my skin does not qualify for me to be treated as less than. In conclusion, I talked about historically Black lives have not mattered. what the Black Lives Matter movement is seeking to accomplish and the reason behind protesting. Well, one reason behind protesting. I hope this opens your eyes to the movement a little bit more, and I thank you.